Chapter 9. Meredith stared at the ceiling, her eyes fixed on a small spot where a bit of paint had chipped off. How long she'd been staring at the spot she wasn't sure, but it was already dark outside. At some point she had discarded her workout clothes, showered, and slipped into a sleep shirt and shorts. She felt numb. Daric's words had cut so deep. She knew he was a cruel bastard. But not like this. The pain that slashed through her was so unbearable that she had to shut down, had to cut herself off from everything before the feelings and memories came back. You mangy mutt. Come back here, mutt. You'll do as I say or else. You better not be sassing me back again, mutt. Echoes from a long time ago came back to haunt her now and then. Daric's words brought them back to the surface, ringing clear as if she'd just heard them from Jed and Marie's mouth seconds ago. Did he see her past when he touched her, heard the words and used them against her to hurt her? And to think she thought she kinda liked him, especially after he listened and comforted her. Was it all a joke to him? Or a way to get out of here? Her stomach grumbled loudly. She realized she hadn't eaten since breakfast and a loud gurgling sound made her sit up. Fine, I'm gonna get something to eat, she said to no one in particular. Glancing at the clock, she winced at how late it was. At least there probably wouldn't be anyone in the kitchen at this hour. She got up, slipped on her flip-flops and then walked to the door. She yanked it open and when she tried to walk out, promptly collided with something solid. Meredith's jaw grew slack when she saw who it was, and she tried to close the door. But Daric's hand snaked between the door, blocking her so she couldn't shut it. He pushed it open and walked inside. Get out, she said, turning away from him and crossing her arms over her chest. I don't want to see you right now. I'm going to talk to Grant tomorrow and tell him that you're not coming with us anymore. Meredith, he said with a long sigh. I'm sorry. My words hurt you and I apologize. It was uncalled for. You bet it was, she shouted, turning back around to face him. Did you see them calling me that word when you touched me? Did you see my past? What are you? He paused and shook his head. No, I didn't use your step-parents' words to hurt you. I'm afraid I did all that on my own, he said, his head lowering. Meredith could hear the sincerity in his voice. Damn him. She didn't want to forgive him. She wanted to hate him so she could stay away from him, so she could stop wanting him. I know what I said was unforgivable, he said somberly, but I hope you'll let me make amends. How? She asked in spite of herself. What she really should be doing was tossing the warlock out of her room. Wait, he said and walked back to the door. He picked up a large brown paper bag he left on the floor. Walking back to Meredith, he handed her the bag. What's this? She peered inside. Curiously, she took out a small familiar package. Oh my God, how did you get all this chocolate? And the little mermaid. Her eyes went wide at the green and white DVD box in her hands. This is my all-time favorite Disney movie. I know, he said with a small smile. Dr. Cross was nice enough to help me procure these on short notice even after she gave me a few choice words when I told her why I needed them. He gave a wince. Do you happen to know why she would call me a tap-dancing son of a monkey? Meredith snorted. Don't worry, Sebastian's rubbing off on her. I'm sure she's going to learn better things to call you. She plopped back on her bed, turning the entire paper bag over, spilling all the contents on her bed. There was a huge pile of chocolate bars, a half-dozen Disney DVDs and 2 plastic wrapped sandwiches. You didn't come out for dinner, Daric said. She didn't say anything but ripped open a candy bar, biting into it. Thanks, she said, chewing through the nougat and chocolate. So good. You know which treat you really want to bite into, her she-wolf said. I'm so happy eating my chocolate right now that I'm not even mad at you. I'm just going to ignore you while I get my fill of sugar. Well, enjoy your evening, Daric said as he turned away. Wait, she called, waving the chocolate bar in the air. Have you eaten? He gave her a small smile. Yes, I've had my meal in my room. How about dessert? She said, gesturing to the pile of treats on her bed. She then winced inwardly as she saw a strange look pass over Daric's face. I mean chocolate. Obviously. I have to confess, I've never seen such a variety of chocolate, he grinned. Then come and try some. Daric walked back and sat on the other edge of her bed, peering at her haul. He picked up one candy bar, opened it and took a bite. Not bad. Not bad, she asked in an exasperated voice. Don't you like chocolate? I'm afraid I don't have much of a sweet tooth, he confessed. Fine, more for me, Meredith said gleefully as she opened another package. Caramel and nuts my favorite. As she bit into the bar, she saw him watching her, his gaze dipping down to her lips. Heat rushed through her body, and it was a wonder all the chocolate didn't melt right then and there. Jesus, he looked so sexy sitting across from her, wearing jeans and a black tank top that showed off his arms. Gruel. Yum. Ugh, shut up. She shoved another piece of candy into her mouth, hoping it would quiet the she-wolf. Meredith, he began, placing his hands on his lap. I really am sorry for what I said today. I hope you will forgive me someday. She sighed. I've said some bad things to you too, but never that personal. I know. Again, I'll apologize however many times you need me to. I don't know why. You know it didn't hurt me much when they called me that word. I mean, after a while it was actually getting old. She let out a nervous laugh. No child should have to hear such an insult, he commented. She bit her lip trying to figure out Daric. He was confusing. One minute he was insulting her and the next he was coming to her, giving her chocolate. Did that saying about Greeks bearing gifts apply to heart-stoppingly handsome Vikings? As she lifted her head up, her eyes clashed with his. She was transfixed as she stared into them. They were like mesmerizing pools of seawater and reminded her of the Caribbean Ocean, blue-green and clear. Daric, she whispered softly. He moved closer, pushing the pile of chocolate and DVDs aside. His fingers touched her jaw and she closed her eyes, allowing his scent to permeate through her senses. Rich, heady, and 1,000 times more delicious than the actual treat she had devoured minutes earlier. There is one line we cannot cross, he warned, and we are getting dangerously close to it. Her eyes flew open and she held her breath when she saw how close his face was to hers. You're right, she said, staring at his mouth. So totally right. Meredith gasped when his lips touched hers. His kiss was gentle and soft, not at all what she expected. She placed her hands on his hard chest, the skin radiating with heat even through his thin t-shirt. She moved closer to him, climbing onto his lap as she wrapped her arms around his neck, her mouth opening up to him. A moan escaped her mouth as she tasted his tongue, the slightest hint of chocolate there making her melt against him. She wasn't sure when his kisses became urgent, but before she knew it she was on her back, and Daric was pushing her knees apart as he settled between her thighs. She wrapped her legs around him, heels digging into his back, and she groaned when she felt his rock-hard erection dig into her hip. Her panties flooded with wetness, and she eagerly rubbed herself against the ridge of his cock, straining through his jeans. As Daric's warm mouth continued to assault hers, his hand slipped between them. Large fingers skimmed over the wet spot on her panties, rubbing over her pussy lips through the damp fabric. She squirmed against him, pushing her hips, wanting more. Daric, she moaned when he ripped his lips away from hers to travel lower, dragging his stubbly jaw against the soft skin of her neck. She closed her eyes, waiting for him to slip his fingers inside her when suddenly she felt the heavy weight of his body lift off her. She sat up quickly, breathing heavy as she watched him slink away from her. I'm sorry, he said quickly. I shouldn't have done that. What? She asked. Why? Why? He looked at her, then stood up. You know why. This cannot be. It's just sex. She shot to her feet. Look, it doesn't have to be this big thing. I'm not looking for that, and I know you aren't either. But you want me. Judging by the size of your boner, she pointed out, gesturing to his lap. That doesn't mean I'm going to act on it, he reasoned. Meredith, I truly am sorry for what I said. For everything I said that hurt you, but you and I both know we can't do this. Fine, she said angrily. Get out of my room. Meredith. I said get out. She pointed to the door. As you wish, he said with a curt nod before leaving. Meredith wanted to slam something, preferably a chair, into Daric's handsome face. His rejection hurt, sending her she-wolf howling with pain. No, he was right, she told herself. Too many complications. There was an entire sea of complications if they went down that path. She had to focus on the task at hand, and Daric would just be a distraction. With a sigh, she picked up the discarded candy and DVDs, sweeping them back into the paper bag. She couldn't help but feel touched by the gesture, even if Daric was acting like a dickweed right now. God, she threw herself at him. Did she have no shame? She was gorgeous, had a killer body, funny, and had an amazing personality. She could sleep with any guy she wanted given the chance. She didn't need the attentions of a certain warlock who would just mess up her head and her life. She plopped back on her bed, considering taking a shower. She should at least change her underwear, as she had sacrificed another pair of panties to the sex. God's thanks to Daric. Rolling over and burying her face on her pillow, she groaned. His scent was sticking to her, and it wasn't just because she had chocolate all over her bed. She should really wash it off, but the scent felt too good on her skin and clothes. God, what was she going to do tomorrow and for the rest of the time she had to work with him? Meredith. Archie's voice was strained as he called her attention. Stop daydreaming and think. But I've tried everything. She stood up and threw the tools on the ground. This is stupid. She kicked the heavy old safe, but only succeeded in hurting her toe. She let out a string of curses. Meredith needs to put like $20 in the swear jar. Quinn laughed. Shut up. She grabbed a wrench and threw it at Quinn, who ducked out of the way. He stuck his tongue out at her. Killian shot him a warning glare. You can do it, Mare. We all have to go through it. Connor gave her a confident nod, and then hit Quinn on the head, which made the younger man cry out in protest. The old man let out a sigh and walked towards her. Meredith, you must learn patience. You're young, I understand that, but you must try. Why do I gotta learn how to open this stupid old safe? No one uses these anymore. My dear, I'm trying to equip you with all the tools you need to survive. Lockpicking, pickpocketing, safecracking, self-defense, your gymnastics, training and dance lessons. All of these are tools you may need someday. The old man explained. What kind of mentor would I be if I let out you into the world without proper training and guidance? But this safe is an exercise, he interrupted. Patience and critical thinking. You can't rush into jobs without a plan, and you certainly need to be prepared when things go sideways. Now go. Meredith let out a groan. Fine. She kneeled down in front of the old safe and began to work on the old safe again. Sweat poured down her face as she tried to remember everything Archie had taught her. She knew the type of safe it was and the model, and based on that, she knew how many numbers there were in the combination. Placing the stethoscope in her ears, she took a deep breath and carefully turned the dial, listening for the soft click that indicated the right number. 20 minutes later, as the last number clicked into place, the heavy metal door opened. I did it, Meredith said, raising her fists in the air. I knew you could do it, Killian said, rushing over to her. And you did it. Faster than Quinn or Connor did. Really? She asked, her face breaking into a wide smile. But not faster than you. No one is faster than me, Killian teased. Except Archie. Archie strode over to them and clapped Meredith on the back. I'm proud of you, Meredith, he said, for not giving up. Never give up. There's always a way out of any situation. Chapter 12. The New York downtown hospital was unusually busy for a weekday morning. The three lone wolves, Meredith and Daric, walked right in without anyone stopping them. They made their way to the elevator and Killian pressed the button for the 11th floor. Merlin said he's in 113A. As soon as they reached the floor, they filed out, following the directions posted on the walls to the right room. Quietly, Meredith opened the door, walking in first into the near-empty semi-private room. Two of the sections had their curtains drawn, and after peeking behind the first one and seeing an older woman sleeping, she signaled to the rest that Sven was in the other bed. They approached the bed at the end, carefully slipping between the drawn curtains. A blond man, probably in his late 20s, was lying very still on the bed. His face was covered in bruises, and a tube was stuck down his throat. Looks like he was nearly beaten to death, Quinn said as he looked over the chart at the foot of the bed. What else do we know? Meredith asked. Not much, Killian said. Apparently, Sven had no other relatives or friends in New York. They called Merlin's because he had the phone number written down on a piece of paper in his wallet. Daric's eyes narrowed at the young man. Something about him seemed familiar, but he couldn't say where he had met or seen the man before. He surely would have remembered, though with his face in his current state, who knows what Sven really looked like? Daric. Meredith asked, a concerned look on his face. Are you all right? Something about him. He trailed off but moved closer to the man. I need to. No. No what? Killian asked. He paid the Lycan no mind but instead took a deep breath and placed his hands on Sven's arm. Instantly, a jolt of energy rushed through him and the visions filled his head. Tall cliffs, greenery, clear water, wildflowers on a hill. Suddenly the vision changed. An older man in a hat falling fast. Another man, dark-haired, pushing him off the side of a building. And then, blood everywhere. Daric let go of Sven, staggering back. Daric! Meredith cried as she grabbed onto his shirt. Connor gripped his shoulders to steady him. What did you see in your vision? Meredith asked. Was it Archie? He grew quiet but nodded. The first vision was strangely familiar, like a place he had been to before, but it was from a different perspective. That vision felt like it was all Sven's, rather a memory. The second one, however, was different. That was not the man's memory. It was one that was shared or sent to him, and the feel and colors of that particular vision were not only familiar but also known to Daric. Let's go back to Fenrir, he declared. We have much to discuss with the Alpha. Hold on, you can see the future? Killian asked. Did you see who killed Archie? Not quite, he said, and explained to the three lone wolves about his seer powers. The man in the hat, Quinn frowned. That was Archie, Connor supplied. Possibly, Daric said. I didn't see the dark-haired man's face, but I know someone who might. Who? My mother. It was her vision, which somehow ended up in this man's head. As they drove back to Fenrir, Killian called Grant and explained what happened. After getting clearance from Jared, Grant's admin, they were able to take the private elevators to the penthouse executive level of the Fenrir Corp headquarters. Once there, they headed straight to the Alpha's office where Grant, Nick, Alina, and Alex were already waiting for them. So this Sven, Grant said after they arrived. He's somehow connected to Archie's killer, and to your mother, Daric. The warlock shrugged. It seems like a coincidence. I don't believe in coincidences, Alina interjected. Neither do I, Daric agreed. Which is why I need to talk to Signa. She's the only one who can shed light on the situation. I've spoken with Vivienne Chatrain, the leader of the New York Coven. Unfortunately, she won't allow three lone wolves, especially ones unfamiliar to her, into their compound. Will Signa come here? Killian asked. Grant shook his head. She refuses to leave and wants Daric to come to her. Then how are we supposed to see her? Meredith asked. Daric should go to the compound, Alina said. Meredith can drive him there, Alex suggested. What? The blonde Lycan looked from Alex to Alina to Daric. It makes sense, Grant said. You're friends with Vivienne's daughter and she already knows you. I'm sure she'd be willing to give you permission to come along. Daric, does that sound good? If I can see my mother, of course, Alpha, Daric agreed. Wait, you're just going to let us go on a road trip? Meredith looked at the Lycan suspiciously. I think you've proven yourself trustworthy and you'd still be in New York territory, Nick said, making Meredith's jaw drop in shock. Besides, you can't really get away from us, the beta remarked, eyeing the ever-present tracker on her ankle. It's only 3 hours one way, Alina added. If you leave early in the morning, you can be back by midnight. You'll even have time for a leisurely lunch and maybe a quick dinner stop. It's settled then, Grant said. Take one of the cars and drive up to the Coven compound. Talk to your mother and find out about the visions. Archie's death is connected to Stefan. Then this is our best chance of finding. Chapter 13. Did you manage to get him, Victoria? Stefan asked. I told you this was an important job. He will not be able to talk, Master, Victoria assured him. Our men made sure of that. But he's still alive? I'm afraid so. Victoria bowed her head. They said that the police came, and they were spooked. But don't worry, I'll personally see that he will not live to see another day. Who is he anyway? Stefan rubbed his chin, and his eyes narrowed into thin slits. I'm not sure. But our ally said that we had to get rid of him. The man was following him and had witnessed something important. Did he say what? I can only guess, Stefan pondered. Wait, is there more? The place where he worked, it was a place where witches frequented. Merlins. And apparently, a couple of Lycans had paid a visit as well. What? Stefan asked. Were they after the man too? We don't know, Victoria confessed. We will keep an eye on him. If the Lycans show up again, we'll know. Chapter 14. Meredith supposed that she was lucky this was only a day trip. It wasn't like this was a big vacation or road trip. This was a job, the last job she would be doing for Archie, and the most important one. It felt weird being in the car with just Daric. Thank God for music streaming services, and she could at least listen to the radio at full blast as they sped down the highway. Whether Daric was disturbed that her road trip playlist included songs like Highway to Hell, Airbag, and Killer Crash, she didn't know. The warlock hadn't said more than a few words since they left Manhattan over 3 hours ago. Instead, he stared out the window, his face a neutral mask. I think we're almost there, Meredith declared as they entered the town of Little Water, New York. After driving through the town, they followed the back country road for another 15 miles. They almost missed the turnoff that would lead them to the compound if Daric had not pointed it out. By the time they entered, 2 figures were waiting for them. One was an older, red-headed woman, and the other was a tall, burly man wearing a plaid shirt. Welcome, Meredith. Daric, Vivienne Chatrain, leader of the New York Coven, greeted as they exited the SUV. How was the trip? Long, Meredith said with a sigh. Well, you'll be happy to know we have lunch ready, the older woman said, with a grin. Hello, Daric. The warlock stopped short, his eyes flickering in surprise. Intense blue-green eyes scrutinized Vivienne, and then he shook his head. Forgive me for being rude, he said with an apologetic bow. Vivienne shook her head. Don't worry about it, Daric. I'm sure it's shocking to see me, especially since Victoria and I are twins. But they're nothing alike, the large man beside her said in a gruff voice. Oh, I'm sorry for being rude, Vivienne laughed. This is my husband, Graham Chatrain. Graham eyed Daric suspiciously but gave the other warlock a nod. Wow, this is Mr. C, Meredith exclaimed. But you, she looked at Vivienne, and back again at Graham. The witch had always seemed so classy and worldly. Meredith often joked with Laura that she wanted to be Vivienne when she grew. And Graham? Well, with his white beard he looked like Santa Claus if Santa hit the gym every day the rest of the year when he wasn't delivering presents. He was over 6 feet tall and had wide shoulders with thickly muscled arms straining under his shirt. The witch chuckled. I know. But trust me, she said, giving Meredith a wink. It works. She turned back to Daric. I'm sure you're eager to see your mother. She's been anxious and has been waiting for you. She's back at the house. Thank you again for helping her, Daric said. For that I owe you. We always help those in need, Vivienne said. You know that, Daric. You're a warlock after all. Now let's go to our house. Although Vivienne was chatting with Meredith, she only half listened as she tried to sneak glances at the warlock. Daric remained quiet as they walked to the house at the end of the compound. What was he feeling right now? Anxious? Nervous? It had been years since he'd seen his mother, so she could only imagine. They entered Vivienne and Graham's house and went straight into the kitchen. Next to the stove was a tall but slight woman stirring a steaming pot of what smelled like seafood soup. She had delicate, elfin features, and her closely cropped blonde hair only made her look more pixie-like. As she turned to the newcomers, her blue-green eyes widened and filled with tears, and Meredith knew this was Signa. Signa dropped the spoon on the floor and then rushed over to Daric, embracing him in a tight hug. The warlock wrapped his arms around her, soothing her back, as her frail body racked with sobs. Oh, forgive me, I'm sorry, Signa hiccuped as she disentangled herself from Daric. I'm just overcome with emotion. Yeah, someone's been cutting onions around here, Meredith said as she discreetly tried to wipe the tears from the corner of her eyes. Signa's gaze landed on the Lycan, her eyes scrutinizing Meredith. Daric, who is your friend? Mother, this is Meredith, Daric introduced. She drove me here. Meredith bit her lip and balled her hands into fists to stop herself from smacking his stupid face. Right. I'm the driver, she said with only a hint of sarcasm in her voice. Nice to meet you, ma'am. She held out her hand, but Signa embraced her instead. Meredith was taken aback by the gesture, and she stood in the older woman's arms awkwardly but sank into the hug after a few seconds. Thank God you're finally here. Signa gasped, then shook her head. I mean, thank you for bringing him here. She looked at Daric. Driving my son. Here. No problem, she murmured. Just doing my job, ma'am. Call me Signa, she said. She walked back to the stove and picked up the drop spoon. I'm so clumsy, please forgive me. I wanted to make some. Fisks up for Daric. It was his favorite when he was a child. I remember, Daric commented. Graham was kind enough to go fishing this morning, so it's quite fresh. I've also been making a pot roast and other fixings, Graham added. We can eat in 5 minutes. Will you help me set the table, Meredith? Vivienne asked, and the Lycan nodded. After everything had been set up, they all sat around the large kitchen table. For lunch, Meredith had a bit of Signa's fish soup, which frankly wasn't her kind of thing, but she politely finished her small bowl. She was more of a meat and potatoes kind of gal, so she was glad Graham had made pot roast, mashed potatoes and green beans. Yummy Vivienne Chatrain was a lucky woman, because the food Graham made was better than sex. Thank you, Graham answered in a puzzled voice. And yes, Vivienne said, flashing her husband a naughty smile. I am lucky. Oh fucknuts, I said that out loud, didn't I? Meredith slapped her palm over her mouth. Sorry. Daric looked at her with a disapproving look. Oh God, Meredith thought. I'm such an idiot. And Signa must think I'm a trashy foul-mouthed hoe. She wasn't sure why she needed the witch's approval, but Signa having a good opinion of her felt important. So Daric, Vivienne said, quickly changing the subject. You really can't stay overnight? I assure you you're very welcome as long as Signa is here. She's staying in one of the empty cottages, so there's plenty of room for you. And Meredith. The warlock shook his head. Thank you for your offer, but the Alpha wanted us back in New York right away. It does seem unusual, you two traveling alone. Vivienne looked to Meredith. I hope you understand about me not allowing your brothers to come here. Have to protect my coven too. No worries. I'm just glad I can drive Daric here, she said sweetly while giving the warlock the side eye. Thank you again. I'm so happy he's found you, Signa said, then quickly cleared her throat. I mean, I'm so happy he's found someone to bring him here. You're welcome. At least Signa was grateful. Maybe the witch didn't hate her. Now, Graham began as he stood up. I have dessert. Chocolate cake and coffee. Yes, please, Meredith said eagerly. I love chocolate. That she does, Daric replied, which earned him a dirty look from the Lycan. I'm fine, thank you, Graham, Signa said. If you really must leave then, perhaps we should spend some time together? We can take a walk in the woods. Out back. You probably will want to leave for New York before it gets too dark. Yes, excellent idea. Daric stood up. Vivienne, Graham, thank you for your hospitality and the meal. We will be back in a few hours. He helped his mother out of her chair and led her out of the house through the back door. Meredith remained seated, unaware she had a scowl on her face until Graham placed a plate with a large slice of chocolate cake in front of her. This should help, he said gruffly. Thanks. She took bite. Oh, my God. This is the best chocolate cake I've had. If you weren't married already. Vivienne laughed. Sorry, dear, she said, patting the younger woman's hand. You're gonna have to find one of your own. You know, Meredith grumbled through another mouthful of cake. She swallowed and took a gulp of water. I'm never getting married. The witch sighed. That's what they all say. What do you mean? Oh, nothing. Would you like another slice? Daric followed Signa as she led them down a path to the woods behind the Chatrain home. The leaves on the trees were already beginning to turn, and there was that crisp and cool feeling in the air that signaled the beginning of autumn. They didn't speak at first, merely enjoying each other's company. Daric had so many questions in his mind he wanted to ask her but feared bringing up the memories of her captivity. Finally Signa spoke. I'm fine, Daric, you can talk, she said as if reading his mind. Being here, surrounded by other witches, has been good for me. You can relax. I can't, Mother, he said, gritting his teeth. Not while he is still out there. He must pay for what he's done to you. You were his prisoner for 18 years. And so were you, she said, linking her arm with his. Don't forget you were also a captive. Not locked up behind bars or with chains, but still a prisoner. Yet I did unspeakable things, he said with a frown. If you only knew. Eh, she protested. You are now working towards redeeming yourself and I know you will. I have seen it. What else have you seen, mother? Signa looked at him cryptically. I cannot tell you, but there are other things we should talk about. Like why you are here. Yes, he nodded. The Alpha has told you? He explained it somewhat. But it's best if you show me what you saw. Daric stopped and turned to his mother, taking her hand. He closed his eyes, feeling the link between them. He searched his memories, finding the vision from Sven, sending it to her through their connection. Signa gasped and her eyes flew open. These were all the visions from the boy. Sven, you said? Is he hurt? He nodded. Yes. He's alive, thank God, and recovering in the hospital. Do you recognize anything? The older witch grew pale and she nodded. The first one, it reminded me of our village, but from a perspective, one I'd never seen before. It's like watching a familiar place through someone else's eyes. Exactly, Daric agreed. And the second? It is your vision, right? Yes, she confirmed. It was indeed my vision. I had it just before I was released. Daric, she said, her voice trembling. That vision was for you. I can't go into detail, but it was important for you to see it. She took his hands in hers. I couldn't use our link, knowing that Stefan would see it, too, so I thought I'd cast a wider net. What do you mean? I thought, if you and I were the only seers in the world, if I sent out the vision, then you would eventually pick it up. I kept trying and trying until Stefan came to bring me to you. Daric frowned, and then he realized what his mother was saying. I didn't, but I suppose this Sven did. How? He is human. Signa shrugged. I don't know, Daric. Perhaps he was meant to see it. Maybe he is connected to us in some way. We have lost all other connection with the larger world, Daric pointed out. We have only each other now, mother. The witch smiled sadly. Yes. Our village is long gone, I've seen it in my mind. I guess not many young people want to fish or hunt these days. Daric laughed. Yes. They prefer the convenience of the modern world. So, Signa continued. The man in the hat, you know him? Not personally, but he was Meredith's adoptive father, and I'm helping her. And her brothers find who killed him. It's starting to look like Stefan may have had something to do with his death as well. Signa looped her arms through her son's and then tugged at him. Let's continue our walk since it's such a lovely day. They went deeper into the woods, where it grew even more still and quiet. This place was special. Daric could feel the magic surrounding them. It was a subtle presence that hung in the air. The feeling was refreshing, something he hadn't felt since he was a child. Now, Signa began. Tell me about Meredith. She and her Lycan brothers were raised by the man in your vision. His name was Archie Leacham. The police suspected. No, his mother interrupted, shaking her head. Tell me about Meredith. What about her? He asked. What is she like? She is brash, crude, loudmouthed, stubborn, headstrong. He let out a sigh. Beautiful, loyal, kind-hearted, and she hides her vulnerability behind that brassy exterior. And you can't stop thinking about her, Signa finished. Don't lie to me. Daric, I'm your mother, and you need to be careful what you send me through our link. I didn't realize. Daric felt embarrassed and turned his head away. I hope you didn't see anything inappropriate. I didn't, but I could feel her at the edges of your thoughts and feelings. She explained. So tell me, why are you avoiding Meredith and denying what you feel for her? You don't understand, he said, unlinking their arms. Then tell me so I can. I don't know where to begin, mother, he shrugged. She was my enemy and she's also bonded to the New York clan against her will. I don't know where her loyalties lie. Ah, so you can't trust her? Do you think she trusts you? I don't. I mean, that's not the point. Also, he took a deep breath. When I touch her, I see nothing, mother. Nothing. Daric shook his head. Yes. For the first time I've encountered someone whose past and future are unknown to me. What does it mean? Does she have no future? A cold fear gripped him. Will she die, mother? She shook her head. I don't know, Daric, but just because you can't see what lies ahead for her doesn't mean it's bad. Maybe you just weren't meant to see. But maybe, just maybe, you should follow your heart. Signa placed a hand on his chest. It's a good one. Like your father's heart. Daric's face became stone-like. I cannot, mother. Not while Stefan is alive. Your need for vengeance is clouding what's real. The truth. She sighed and laid her head on his chest. My son, don't let the hate overcome you. Stefan must pay for his crimes, but don't get any more blood on your hands. Or have hers tainted. What do you mean? Signa pulled away. Come, we should head. Chapter 15. Meredith stayed behind at the house as Daric and Signa went for their walk. She helped Vivienne with the dishes, as Graham went off to do some work on the house. They chatted, and Meredith was glad to have had some time alone with the witch. Having never known her mother or been around females much growing up, she secretly enjoyed the attention from Vivienne. She felt a pang of envy that Lara grew up with such a lovely and supportive mother, though according to her friend sometimes too supportive. But then again, Meredith couldn't and wouldn't change her past. Are you all right, dear? Vivienne said as she handed Meredith a clean dish to put away. What? Meredith shook herself out of her thoughts. I'm just wondering. You seemed distracted, that was all, the older woman said slyly. Just tired from the drive, she sighed. She wished they didn't have to go back to Manhattan. The Coven compound reminded her of Archie's place outside Portland. His mansion was built on an acreage and surrounded by trees and greenery. This time of the year the leaves would be turning and soon the entire landscape would have been bursting with golds and reds. Are you sure you can't stay? She shook her head. Grant's orders were explicit. Get in and get out. I'm sorry about your father, dear, Vivienne said quietly. Her automatic denial of Archie being her father didn't come out this time. Thank you, she said gratefully. Please let me, she said, taking a tray of clean dishes from Vivienne's hand. I can put these back. As she opened the cupboard and began to place the dishes on the shelf, she looked out of the window, wondering how far Daric and Signa had gone. She frowned. That butthole, calling her his driver. None of his other insults had stung as much as that one did. She drove me here. Really, asshole? That's how he introduces her to his mother. Meredith, dear, Vivienne said, taking a glass from her. Maybe I should put away the dishes before you break them with your bare hands. What? Oh, I'm so sorry, Vivienne, she said, shaking her head. I don't know what's gotten into me. Not Daric, I'm guessing, the witch asked wryly. Meredith's head jerked toward Vivienne so fast she thought she'd get whiplash. What? Never mind. Maybe she should be glad she didn't have a mother to embarrass her or have the awkward sex talk with. Oh, you too, Vivienne sighed. I don't know if you were going to stab each other with your forks or have at it on the kitchen table. She shook her head. The sexual tension between you is practically electric. And that's all it is, just tension, Meredith pouted. Dear, you're a woman, Vivienne said. You're young, gorgeous, and sexy. Just take what you want. You don't think I'm insane? Why? For getting horny? For wanting that hot piece of ass? Meredith was shocked at Vivienne's words. I like her, the she-wolf said, seemingly popping up out of nowhere. You should listen to her instead of your stupid friends. You young people today, the witch said. I swear I don't know how you all can be such prudes with your sexting and hookup apps. You're worse than Lara. Are you suggesting I try to bang Daric? Why, yes, Vivienne encouraged. You should do just that. Do it. Do it. Do it. Oh, shut it, horny bitch. The wolf laughed and tossed its head. Meredith groaned. I think I'll get some rest before the drive back. Great pep talk, thanks, she said before she scampered out of the kitchen. Try to seduce Daric? Daric had been the one coming to her. Maybe she should be the one to come to him this time. Thank you again, Daric said to Graham and Vivienne, as they walked him and Meredith to their car. For your hospitality and taking care of my mother. Please come and visit any time, Vivienne said. Signa embraced her son one more time. Think about what I said. Daric hesitated. I will think about all of it. Thank you. The witch turned to Meredith. It was lovely to meet you, she said with a bright smile on her face. Please take care of my son. Yeah, sure, she said, frowning. What did the witch mean? After their final goodbyes, Meredith and Daric got into the SUV, and soon they were driving back to New York City. Much like their trip upstate, the warlock remained quiet, but he seemed different this time. Even more withdrawn. They were already halfway into their drive and neither had said a word. Did you find out anything from your mother? Meredith finally said when she couldn't take his silence and the distance between them. Yes, he said, his voice cold and eyes turning hard. Well, are you gonna tell me or what? She asked impatiently. Maybe she shouldn't listen to Vivienne. It was obvious something had happened while Daric and Signa talked. Did the witch tell her son to stay away from her? Possibly. And that thought slashed at her gut. Perhaps it would be best to wait until we talk to your brothers, that way I don't have to waste my time explaining things twice. Right. Because it was a waste of his time talking to her. Well, we should. Meredith let out a shriek as the vehicle suddenly lurched forward and began to sputter. She swerved to the side of the highway, getting out of the way. What's wrong? Daric asked. She shrugged and tried to start the car. The engine gave one last heave and then nothing. Motherfucker, she cursed, slapping her palm on the wheel. God damn it. This stupid piece of shit. Do you know what's wrong? He asked. Meredith shook her head. I know zilch about cars. With a sigh she reached over to the dash and got the cell phone Elena had given her for emergencies. It was locked down and she couldn't use the data to access the internet, but she could call and send text messages. She supposed this counted as an emergency. Chapter 18. Killian and Connor were already in the SUV by the time Daric, Meredith, and Quinn arrived at the garage. As they drove through Manhattan, Daric pondered on his conversation with his mother about the visions. Although he had been occupied by the events of the last 24 hours, the bigger picture never strayed from his thoughts. Find out how Archie was connected to Stefan and, of course, kill the master mage. His need for vengeance hadn't tempered, but looking over at Meredith, the stakes were much higher now. Aside from the distraction, there was one thing he realized just now. Stefan could use Meredith against him like he did with Signa. Cold fear gripped his heart, knowing how cruel the master mage was, and there was no line he wouldn't cross to get what he wanted. For now he had to compartmentalize what he was feeling and block out Stefan from his thoughts and visions. The link between them was growing weaker every day, but Daric would never take the walls down, not while Stefan was still alive. Meredith looked up at him with her amber eyes, looking soulful and worried. He gave her a reassuring smile, wishing he could put his arms around her or even just touch her soft skin. It was nice to forget the world outside while they were alone in the motel room in the middle of nowhere. But that was only temporary, and now they had to go back to the real world. They reached the parking garage of the New York Downtown Hospital and made their way to the 11th floor. When they got to Sven's room, they saw that Merlin was already there, sitting by the bed. Here they are, Sven, Merlin said to the younger man. Don't be afraid. They just want to help you. Sven's face was still swollen. His lips split and he sported a black eye, but at least now he stood upright and didn't need the breathing tube. He warily eyed the newcomers, examining each one until his gaze clashed with Daric. I know you, I think. Sven frowned. I'm sorry, I can't remember much. Where are you from, Sven? Daric asked. He was sure he had never met him, but there was something eerily familiar about the other man. I came to New York to be an actor, but I'm from Canada, he replied. But I moved to Toronto with my mother when I was 6 or 7. We used to live in Norway. The young man's words jolted something in Daric, and he moved forward and touched Sven's hands. He closed his eyes, seeing the same vision he had seen before, but now there was more. It was slow at first, like someone slowing down a roll of film, then speeding it up. The wildflowers, the cliffs, and the clear water beneath it. Then the inside of a house, small but cozy. A tall, blonde man and woman were embracing in the corner. The door opened and the vision rushed forward to show more of the outside. Small huts built with stone and wood. The structures were simple and rustic, set against the majestic backdrop of a fjord. Daric's eyes flew open. Our village, he said at the young man. Well, you know my old village back in Norway? Sven asked, his clear blue eyes widening. I can't even remember the name. Its name is lost, I'm afraid, Daric replied somberly. But I remember what it looked like, just as you do. And I remember you. One time your mother asked me to watch you while she put the laundry up on the line to dry. He shook his head. I'm sorry, I don't remember. You are Ulrich's son. The day Stefan came to his village, he killed 3 blessed witches and warlocks to take their powers. One of them was his father. Jonas, and the other was Ulrich the healer. How did you know? So you really lived in the village? Yes. That day your father died. Mine perished along with him. Sven gasped. I don't remember much. Mama made sure I didn't see. But after that, we fled and ended up in Canada with my uncles. Mama is human like me. So wait a minute, Killian interrupted. You two grew up in the same village. But how does he know Archie? He doesn't, but I can explain what happened, Daric said. He told the others what his mother said about sending her vision out. I think because of our connection to Sven and his father's abilities as a blessed warlock, he may have inadvertently received the vision. Like an antenna tuned only to get visions of the future, Quinn deduced. Daric nodded. Exactly. She cast her net wide enough and Sven here was able to get it. Wait. You saw the dreams I've been having? Sven asked. About the man in the hat. Yes, Daric said. Now why don't you tell us what happened? Sven took a deep breath. It was a couple of weeks ago that I started having these dreams. I thought, well, they're just dreams, right? But I kept having them over and over again, and they were so real. He shook his head. Well, one night at Merlin's while I was on stage I saw him. The man in the hat. Did you see who he was meeting? Killian interrupted. No, not while I was up there, Sven answered. I was up first that night, he explained. And I saw the man enter, but he was exactly as I saw in my dream. Same suit and hat. He looked down. It's okay, Sven, Merlin encouraged. Tell them what you said to me. I had this bad feeling, you know? So I watched them from the wings. Followed them when they got up to leave. I wanted to stop the man from dying. But I was too late. I was walking outside the building where it happened. Was so fast and I saw him fall. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice strained. I tried. Daric shook his head and placed a hand on Sven's shoulder. It was not your fault. If you didn't save him, then it wasn't meant to be. Sven looked at Quinn. When you asked me about Archie, well, I panicked. Thought you were going to kill me too because I witnessed his death. So when you ran out of the club that night we were there, what happened? Quinn asked. That's the thing. I don't remember, the younger man said. I remember rushing out and running for a couple of blocks. But then I realized there was a group of guys following me. They beat me up, but my memory's clouded. Could it have been a potion? Killian asked. Very possibly, Merlin replied. It's too late to find traces of it, but if he can't remember, the attackers may have used a potion. I spoke with the police this morning, the warlock continued. It seems that Sven got lucky. A couple of cops were having a late supper at this diner next to the alleyway, where the attackers cornered Sven. They heard the commotion and scared them away just in time. You got very lucky, Daric told Sven. I have a few more questions if you don't mind, Killian said. Make it quick, Merlin replied. He just woke up a few hours ago and he's still recovering. As Killian asked Sven for a few more details, Daric quietly slipped out of the room, hoping the lone wolves would not notice. He walked out into the hallway and leaned back against the door, closing his eyes as he tried to make sense of it all. His mind was reeling from the revelation. Sven, Ulrich's son, his father's death. He thought he had buried the pain of what happened that day so deep that he would never feel it again. But seeing Sven and their village had conjured up feelings he thought were long gone. Daric. He opened his eyes and saw Meredith staring up at him, concern marring her face. She slipped her arms around his waist and laid her head on his chest. Are you all right? Your brothers might see us, he said, his voice tight. I don't care, she said. I know what happened in there is messing with your head. What he said. It's a lot to process, so talk to me. There is nothing to talk about, he said, unwinding her arms from his middle. I'm fine. Thoughts of Stefan killing Ulrich flooded his mind. Him standing over his father, driving his sword into Jonas. Then it changed. It wasn't Jonas on the other end of Stefan's sword. It was Meredith. No, you're not, she pouted, crossing her arms over her chest. Don't keep it all inside, Daric. And you would rather have me spew out my thoughts and feelings without a filter the way you do, he said bitterly. Shock and hurt registered on Meredith's face, and Daric instantly regretted his words. Fine, Meredith replied, lifting her chin. Go ahead and bottle up all your feelings. She walked away, heading toward the elevator. Daric watched her leave, the uncomfortable pit in his stomach growing. She disappeared into the elevator. He told himself that it was better this way. What they had last night could never happen again. He couldn't let his emotions run wild. No, he didn't have that luxury. And it was for her own good. Pursuing anything more with Meredith was like painting a target on her back. Hey, where's Meredith? Quinn asked as he and his brothers came out into the hallway. I think she said she'd be downstairs, Daric shrugged. Did you glean any more information from Sven? A couple of details here and there, Killian replied. But nothing more that could lead us to Archie's killer. He says that he didn't see the face of whoever did it. What should we do now? Connor asked. Let's go back and regroup, Killian said. We need to update Grant on what's happening anyway. Meredith was tempted to walk out of the hospital right then and there. Stupid ass stubborn warlock. She kicked the SUV's tire. It made her feel marginally better, but not a lot. She knew Daric was hurting, probably remembering what had happened to his father. Maybe she was presumptuous, but he didn't need to push her away like that. But he was right, she was crude, mouthy, and maybe she didn't think before she spoke. But he made it sound like a bad thing. He said it to hurt her. Why, she didn't know. Meredith wasn't the only one hurt. Her inner she. Wolf cowered and whined in pain. Why doesn't he like us anymore? I don't know, she answered. Maybe Daric decided their affair was over. He had gotten what he wanted and he didn't need her anymore. The thought made her gut ache. Hey, stop daydreaming, Runt, and get in the car, Quinn yelled. She was jolted out of her thoughts, so engrossed in them she didn't hear her brothers and Daric approach or the door unlock. Normally she would have given Quinn a snappy comeback, but instead she climbed into the back seat, squeezing herself into the end, hoping to get as far away from Daric as possible. Thankfully, Connor went in next, taking up the middle seat, and the warlock sat at the other end. We'll head straight to the Alpha's office for a debrief, Killian said. Then we can figure out our next move. The traffic was light, so the drive back was quick, thankfully. The longer she was in Daric's presence, the harder it was for Meredith to control what she was feeling inside. All she wanted to do was scream at the warlock and smack him upside the head. After parking the SUV in the garage, they proceeded to Grant's office, where the Alpha and Beta were already waiting for them. As they sat down to talk, Daric first recounted what his mother said and Killian filled them in on their trip to visit Sven. So, Grant began, we know how Sven and Archie are connected, but who killed Archie and why? Perhaps we should think about why he came to New York in the first place. Nick said. Did he have business here? Did he come to New York regularly? The three lone wolves looked at each other, and the silence in the room was deafening. Meredith recognized that look. It was the look her brothers had when they were hiding something from her. Why was Archie here? Meredith asked, standing up from her chair. It's not important, Killian said. You're lying, she accused. You know why. And if you don't tell us now, I swear I'm going to make you. Meredith, Quinn warned. Listen to us. All we need to do is find out who killed Archie. Why won't you tell me why he came to New York? She walked towards Killian, placing her hands on either side of him. What did he do? Was someone after him? You don't need to know, Killian shot back as he remained seated. He turned away from Meredith, unwilling to look her in the eyes. What the fuck is wrong with you? All of you. She looked at her brothers one by one until her gaze landed on Connor. What are you hiding? Please just tell me. More silence. Finally, Connor spoke. He came to see you. Meredith felt her stomach drop, and her knees shook. If she weren't braced against Killian's chair, she would have collapsed. All this time. No. She shook her head and pushed herself upright. No, no, no. Killian stood over her and placed a hand on her shoulder. Like I said, it's not important why he came. Yes, it is, she shouted. He came because he knew I was stuck here. He came to help me, didn't he? When her brother said nothing, she knew it was true. It doesn't matter, Quinn huffed. Yes, it does, she countered. Archie died because of me. Stop saying that. Connor growled. He stood and walked towards Meredith. We'll find the bastard who killed Archie and get our revenge. He shouldn't have died in the first place. she said, her eyes filling with tears. And you should have told me when you got here. Why did you lie to me? You especially, she said accusingly at Connor. You said I could always trust you. I'm sorry, was all the lone wolf said. I can't. Meredith shook her head and turned to the door. She ignored her brother's calls, walking away swiftly and then breaking into a full-on run as soon as she was out the door. The edges of her vision were going black and she couldn't breathe. She wanted to get out, wanted to destroy something, or hit something, or just do anything to make the hurt go away. Meredith ran to her room as soon as the elevator hit the 16th floor. She threw the door open and slammed it shut behind her. Rage, sorrow, anger, all kinds of emotions coursed through her. She thought she was getting over it, but now it all came back stronger than ever with a new addition: guilt. It was her fault. Archie was dead because of her. The she-wolf howled and she begged to be let out. God, she wished she could just let the wolf take over so she could disappear into her furry body and escape the world, even just for a little bit. She grabbed the chair and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and one of the legs broke off. Next came the lamp, which she tossed on the floor, the base breaking into a million pieces. She ripped the covers and pillows from her bed, then climbed up on top of it and tore the poster on the wall. Letting out a rage-filled cry, she sank down on the mattress, wrapping her hands around her legs as she curled on her side and let the tears flow. Archie. Oh, Archie. I wish you could hear me now. I'm so sorry for the things I said, for the way that I left. She felt the bed dip and a large hand gently stroking her head, pushing her hair away from her face. At first she thought it was Connor, but the chocolate scent tickling her nose told her otherwise. She quickly scrambled to the other end of the bed, squeezing up against the window. What are you doing here? Daric's face was inscrutable, and he placed his hand on his lap. I wanted to see how you were doing. I'm fine, she said, throwing his words back in his face. As you can see. She nodded to her rec room. I've just been spewing my feelings out. He let out a sigh, his shoulders sinking. It seems that even though I said I'd make amends, I cannot stop hurting you. I should be the one who thinks before he speaks. She huffed in agreement but said nothing. I'm sorry, and I know you don't want to hear this or want to believe it, but you did not cause Archie's death, Daric said somberly. I don't want to talk about Archie. Then we won't. He moved closer, sliding over to her. We can talk about me. And why I acted like an ass this afternoon at the hospital. You won't get an argument from me, she grumbled. He gave her a faint smile. I know better than to expect one. Daric let out a sigh. The conversation with Sven and his visions brought back a lot of unpleasant memories. You know which ones? You were there when I told everyone about how Stefan came to our village and killed my father to take his power. I remember, she said quietly. It was like I was experiencing it again. Not only the moment Stefan killed my father, but also destroying my life, taking away everything and everyone I cared for. He paused. And then I thought that there was something else he could take away that would destroy me. She sighed and moved closer, touching his shoulder. Daric, Signa is safe. He'll never take her away from you. I'm not talking about my mother, he said in a soft tone, bending his head so he could rub his cheek on her hand. Meredith froze. He couldn't mean I would protect you until my last breath, he said. And if Stefan found out, he will use you to get to me. He will stop at nothing to get what he wants. Daric, she crawled closer to him, wrapping her arms around his waist and pressing her cheek to his back. She understood now. He was afraid, that's why he pushed her away. That's what he always did, it seemed. But would he do it again? What do you want to do now? The warlock turned around, slipped his arms around her waist and pulled her to his lap. I think I would like to spend the rest of the night showing you how sorry I am. Chapter 19. You know we should not meet like this. Stefan laughed. Are you afraid of me? What? Never. Soon it will not matter anyway, the mage said. Do you have the next part of the plan in place? Yes. The New York clan seems to think they are untouchable, but soon they will learn exactly what we can do to them. And you're certain you can move on your part of the plan soon? Within the week at least. There has been 1 or 2 voices of dissent on the council, but soon they will see things my way. Good, Stefan said. And once you detain the dragon and the warlock, our army can come in. How many of your forces have you gathered so far? About 15 or so, but I'm going to recall the rest. Not bad, I suppose, Stefan cackled. For 2 decades worth of work, this army will be unstoppable, and best of all, they will be under my command. Our command, you mean? Of course. Our command. Just remember that, mage. This is my life's work too. This doesn't work. Then I'm as good as dead. Chapter 20. Meredith felt lightheaded and her vision blurred as she looked at the paper in her hand. No, she shook her head. This wasn't true. Archie wouldn't hide this from her. The bile was rising in her throat, and she slammed her fist on the desk. Meredith? What are you doing in here? Archie's voice was angry. You know, this is my private space. She spun around, the piece of paper in her hand. Archie's face went pale as his eyes trained on the damning evidence she had between her fingers. Meredith. The anger was gone from his voice. I can explain. Please. Really, Archie? She walked to him, waving the paper. You can explain? How long have you had this? I since before I found you. You knew about my real parents. It was her birth certificate. She found in the hidden bottom of his top desk drawer, among other things, keys, more papers, a tablet PC, and 4 envelopes, each with their names on it. Killian, Quinn, Connor, Meredith. She couldn't help herself, of course, and opened hers. The first thing that dropped out was the picture of a toddler with brown eyes and blonde hair. Then a birth certificate where the last name she had lost was written down, as well as the names of her parents, Philip and Lila. What else do you have on us? The old man sighed. I did it to protect you, to help your kind. How? Did you do this on purpose? Did you find us and collect us? Like toys? Or to train us from a young age to be your army of thieves? No, he protested. That wasn't my intent. I wanted to help you and protect you. From what? She asked. It sounds like we needed protecting from you. She threw the birth certificate and the envelope to the ground. Meredith, please. Don't touch me, old man. She tugged her arm away from him. I thought you. A sob ripped from her throat, followed by a growl. Meredith, control yourself, he commanded. Remember what I taught you. Don't let the wolf take over. But she couldn't hear him. The she-wolf inside her was howling, wanting to be let out. She was doing it to protect her, taking all the pain and shielding her. She shifted, right there in his study, and ran out into the woods. The last time she shifted uncontrollably was that night when Jed has raised a hand to her and slapped her so hard she fell on the floor. Her wolf was not as big as it was today, a pup really. She ripped from Meredith's skin and landed on all fours, snarling and growling at Jed, who backed up into the corner of their trailer as the wolf stalked him. The she-wolf wanted to kill the man for hurting Meredith, but unfortunately Marie was right behind her. Meredith's foster mother had taken the shotgun from the wall and pointed it at the pup. When she cocked the gun, the she-wolf knew that she was thwarted and ran off into the night. The she-wolf ran for hours and hours away from that place. She would take care of Meredith from now on, refusing to give back the body they shared until she was healed. Months went by, and they traveled further west. She would only let Meredith shift back when she was exhausted, but always making sure she had shelter for a few days, sneaking them into abandoned buildings and vehicles. She did her best to provide for Meredith, stealing clothes and food if she could. Months and months passed until they reached the coast, to a city called Portland, where a hungry and exhausted Meredith saw the old man in the hat. As the fully grown she-wolf raced through the woods behind her home, she comforted Meredith. Where do you want to go? Anywhere. Anywhere but here. And so, for the second time, she took Meredith away again. She let out a soft cry, her body trembling as her hands scratched at the sheets. Her mind was cloudy at the unfamiliar surroundings and the past, mudding up the present. Strong arms wound around her waist and pulled her to a hard chest. Lips pressed against the back of her neck, and when she realized where she was, she relaxed against Daric. Meredith, he murmured sleepily. It was just a dream. Yeah, she replied softly. Just a dream. It seemed it didn't matter to Meredith if they were in a king-sized bed or the double mattress in Daric's room. She just always had to sleep in the middle of the bed, diagonally and across his chest. Daric found himself squeezed against the wall, with the Lycan's octopus-like arms and legs wrapped around his torso. He gently untangled Meredith's limbs and moved her over so he would have some room to breathe. He pushed her to her side, curling up around her as she sighed and mewed sleepily. His little she-wolf, wild and free and so insatiable. Seeing as Meredith had trashed her room, she and Daric decided to move to his quarters for the evening, but not before she snuck back to the lab to retrieve her gift. While he went to the kitchen to find some food for them, he thought to surprise her, laying out a makeshift picnic for them on the floor of his room, and some blankets. However, it was she who surprised him, slipping into some sexy lingerie, a sheer lacy purple bra, matching thong panties and a garter belt and stockings. He thought he was hungry, but it turned out it wasn't for food. Their meal was momentarily forgotten, as he tossed her onto the bed. Of course, when they were done, Meredith declared a food break, devouring every bit of food he brought. He stroked her soft hair, brushing it aside, and pressed his nose to the pulse behind her ear. He thought it was her perfume, but the wildflower scent was all Meredith. She stirred and pushed her plush ass back at him, making his cock stir again. Daric thought he was spent and satisfied, but his body had other ideas. He couldn't get enough of her. Slipping his hand between her thighs, he parted them, and all he had to do was angle his hips. "Open this fucking door," an angry voice called from the outside, followed by what sounded like a fist rapping on the wood. Who the hell was that? Daric rose from his bed, moving Meredith, who seemingly could sleep through anything, aside and walked to the door. He yanked the door open. Connor stood on the other side, his face drawn into a scowl. "Where is he?" Looked down at Daric's naked state and then peered around him. "You asshole. Knew you were trying to fuck her." This time Daric was prepared for the punch. He should have known better. However, Connor was a skilled fighter and didn't use the same tricks twice. His meaty hands wrapped around Daric's neck and squeezed. Immediately, Daric tried to wrestle the other man's arms away from his neck. As his fingers touched Connor's forearms, he was assaulted with a vision. A young boy, no more than 14 or 15, hands wrapped in filthy bandages. A caged fighting ring. The vicious, bloodthirsty cheer of the crowd. And red. Everywhere. As the air rushed back into his lungs, Daric's eyes flew open and he was staring up at the ceiling in his room back in Fenrir. "Daric, are you okay?" Meredith's worried voice rang in his ear. She sat next to him on the floor, shaking his shoulder. "Connor, you dickhole. What the fuck did you do?" "He touched you." "I told him not to touch you," Connor railed. "For fuck's sake, I'm 25, not 15. She stood up and faced him, planting her hands on her hips, which looked ridiculous considering she was wearing only the bedsheet and was half the other man's size. And FYI, I was doing plenty of touching too. Connor's eyes bulged. "Stop talking like that. I don't want to hear that shit." Daric got to his feet, swaying as he got up. Meredith rushed to his side to help him, but he waved her away. "I'm fine." He looked at Connor. "I'm sorry. For fucking my sister? For what happened to you when you were younger?" "The cage." Connor's eyes widened, and his expression turned hard. "How the fuck?" He lunged at Daric again, but Meredith stood between them. "What's going on?" "Oh, for crying out loud." Killian groaned as he entered the room. Daric was still naked, Meredith was naked under the sheet, and Connor had murder in his eyes. "I can only guess what's happening here, but I trust you're all adults and can sort this out." "Killian," Connor began, "tell this asshole to stay away from her and out of my head." "Killian, tell Connor I'm not a child," Meredith retorted. "Then stop acting like one." Connor shot back. Killian rubbed his palm down his face. "Everyone calm down. Connor, go cool off." "Meredith, Daric, for God's sake, put some clothes on and meet us in our room. Quinn broke his tablet PC, and he'll be back soon so we can." "What did you say?" Meredith interrupted. "I said put some clothes." No, she shook her head. "About Quinn. He went out to buy a new tablet PC? That's it." Meredith's face broke into a smile. "I think I figured it out." "Figured what out?" Killian asked. "I'm not sure yet, but I'll wait until we're all together. We'll meet you in your room in 5, Meredith said. "And try and calm down Connor, will ya?" "I'll do my best," he said, glancing at Daric. "Can I trust you not to provoke?" My brother. Daric sighed. I suspect I provoke him merely by existing, but I'll not needle him. Killian nodded and left, closing the door behind him. Meredith turned to Daric. You saw something, didn't you? He nodded. Has Connor told you anything about his past? Just bits and pieces. Things he lets slip sometimes, others I could guess. She frowned. Why? What did you see? I'm sorry, Minkshare. He shook his head. It's best if I not tell you. Those are his secrets to tell. Now, he continued. What did you discover? I don't know yet, but I'd rather we wait until we get everyone together. I'll meet you at my brother's room, okay? I need a quick shower and some fresh clothes. She gave him a kiss on the cheek and left the room. Daric thought it would be prudent to shower as well, seeing as the Lycans' keen senses would probably pick up the scent of sex around him and Meredith, and he didn't want to risk Connor's wrath again. The visions from the Lycans' past disturbed him. It not only looked violent but felt it too, and he could now understand and sympathize with the Lycan. After all, he himself had gone through traumatic experiences, being trained by Stefan, though the master mage didn't send him out to do his bidding until he was at least an adult. But in many ways he and Connor, and perhaps he suspected the rest of the lone wolves, were more similar than he'd thought. He walked out of his room and down the hallway. As he was about to knock on the door, it opened. Come in, Meredith said. We're all here. The room where the brothers were staying was much larger, with a simple living room and small kitchen area and 2 connected bedrooms. Killian and Quinn were sitting on the couch while Connor was leaning against the breakfast bar, still scowling at Daric. There was some tension in the air, but it probably wasn't just from this morning. Meredith was still obviously upset at her brothers, and they seemed wary of her. Daric sat down on the love seat opposite the couch and Meredith plopped herself beside him, brazenly linking her arm through his. Connor growled, but a warning look from Killian made him back down. Meredith, Killian began, I want to say sorry for not telling you why Archie came here. I hope you understand why. We don't blame you, Quinn added. None of us do. We just didn't want you to think that it was your fault. We were protecting you. Meredith sighed. It's going to be hard for me to get over that because no matter which way you look at it, if he wasn't in New York, he'd still be alive. Daric slipped his hand into hers and squeezed, a gesture she returned. But you're right. We need to focus and find out who killed him. You said you figured something out. What is it? She took a deep breath. I know I got mad at you guys for keeping something from me, but I guess I'm a hypocrite because I kept something from you too. Last night I was dreaming. No, I was remembering the last time I saw Archie. He had been acting weird for a couple of weeks, and I knew he was hiding something. So I broke into his office. She relayed the rest of the story about what she found in the hidden compartment in his drawer. When she got to the part where she said she found files with all their names on it, the tension in the room increased. Killian was the calmest and in control, but his hands tightened into fists. Quinn quickly stood up and began to pace angrily. Connor, on the other hand, remained eerily still, but his eyes turned dark. Did you read the other files? Killian asked, his brows knitting together. She shook her head. No, I didn't. The 3 brothers seemed relieved by her confession. Quinn sat down again. Why did he have those files on us? Was he tracking us down? How did he know about us? Meredith shrugged. I don't know. But somehow he'd gotten hold of all my records. It wasn't just my birth certificate and my picture, but also some newspaper clippings about my dad's death. He'd been murdered, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't even know that. I was told he died in an accident. She straightened her back. Look, whatever Archie's reasons were, he still saved me from a worse fate. And maybe he did the same with all of you. So we need to dig deeper and find out how this is all connected. So what did you figure out? Well, when I was looking through his stuff, I was pretty sure I saw a tablet PC in that hidden compartment of his. Quinn frowned. A tablet PC? Archie barely knew how to email. He still used an old analog phone and texted in all caps. Don't you see? Meredith said. What was he doing with that tablet PC? He did everything on paper, and he hated using technology himself. Why keep it hidden along with our files? We need to find that tablet. And our files, Connor interjected. That too, Killian agreed. We need to go back to Portland. If we leave Today we can come back by tomorrow if we find everything.